It's time for some Week 13 waiver wire targets, and today I'm joined by Dr. Vignesh Doraiswamy, my best buddy in the whole world. Well, one of them. I'm not going to say you're my best friend, but I think you're one of them. He's going to break down some of the most notable injuries from this last week in our rehab roundup, and it felt good to do the voice again. And Vig, this right here, this is called a hook. Okay, this is how you keep the audience. Stick around for the whole show, because at the end we're going to give you some deep waiver wire targets that maybe you can get into the fantasy playoffs and hopefully win your league. Now, Vig, that's a pro hook, sir. I am Alfredo Brown. I'm a professional hooker, apparently. Can I say hooker?
No,
am I allowed to say that?
I mean, you're allowed to say it. Do you want to say it? That's the question.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to say. It depends on the context of the hooking, but yeah, welcome into the show, the Pretend GM Fantasy Football Show. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we have an awesome giveaway for you. So I'm going to make up for saying hooker 3 times now by giving away something. If you're listening on Apple, okay, we are giving away a full-sized NFL football autographed by Javonte Williams. All you have to do, go and leave a review of the show, preferably a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and send that screenshot over to me on Twitter at the Pretend GM. All right, Vig, so let's take a look at the first player here on the waiver wire, and let's just start this out. Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying this player, Brian Robinson, is not available in a lot of leagues, but there is an opportunity. He's available in some leagues, right?
Dude, he's available in a lot of leagues. Let's be honest. He should not be available in any of them. Should have been added way back in like week 5 at the latest, but he's still approximately available in 1/3 of leagues. 68% of Yahoo leagues have him. 65% of ESPN have him. So in a third of your leagues, a third of our listeners could pick him up. He had 20 touches for 125 yards and twice as many carries as Antonio Gibson, who was really, really losing favor out there. Maybe
no, I like that. I like that he's losing flavor. I'm keeping that. Where he's okay. So he's not as spicy as Brian Robinson.
And he's not. Honestly, he is not as spicy as Brian Robinson anymore. And over the last 3 weeks, Brian Robinson has been the running back 13 and has had 2 pretty darn good performances.
Yeah, and you know what? Aside from just the performances on the field, can we talk about Brian Robinson's awesome big hat? Oh my! Like, if you haven't and you haven't seen it, right? You're not on like the Twitter sphere and all that. Please, right now, just like as you're listening to this or watching this or whatever, I'll just open up another tab and just Google Brian Robinson big hat right now, because it's just going to make your day. After such a horrible week 12, or 13, whatever, or week 12, right? Yeah, I don't even know what week it is anymore because it was so bad for me. The Brian Robinson big hat just made me so much happier. Brian Robinson, he's got a pretty good schedule coming up. He's got the Giants a couple times over the next 3 weeks, and that's a pretty easy matchup for fantasy running backs. Then Cleveland, the championship week. So Brian Robinson, he should be rostered already in your leagues, but if he's not, you absolutely must be adding him as the priority number 1 waiver wire add. You know what? It's not a great waiver wire week, but there's some names that do spark us interest. One of them being Gus Edwards, running back for the Baltimore Ravens.
Gus is, again, the top running back in the Baltimore Ravens backfield. I know it's always sort of been hard to know who's going to be number 1 there, but it looks like it's Gus. 16 carries, 52 yards, got a touchdown. The touchdown really made him fantasy relevant, but look at what the Ravens have coming up and think about the fantasy playoffs. The Ravens sort of have pretty easy schedules for running backs. They're playing Cleveland, Atlanta. These folks are like, allowing a decent amount of points to fantasy running back. So I don't know. I feel like if Gus Edwards is available, and again, you just mentioned he's available in 2/3 of ESPN leagues, he's someone that I would consider a pretty decent priority waiver wire ad.
Yeah, I think that you just, when you look at these waiver wire ads, you have to think of look at the big picture. Like, okay, this is my new RB1, this is my new RB2. Just kind of look at all of it surrounding Gus Edwards, and it's okay. Maybe I'm going to have him for another week, another 2 weeks, where he can be useful for me as a flex play. Because a thing to consider here: John Harbaugh came out today just before the show, and it's kind of the benefit of us recording a little bit later on in the day is that at some point J.K. Dobbins will practice to some degree this week. Does that mean he's going to play this week? Maybe not. But, it's something that he's going to get back involved again. So Gus Edwards does look like a good spot start maybe if you need him this upcoming week. And going forward, we're not sure what the hell it's going to be for J.K. Dobbins. But I would just say kind of temper the expectations. This isn't the sexy waiver wire ad week at the running back position that I think people want it to be. please take a moment to like this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Football Guys has so much great content, not just our show, but you've got the Audible, you've got the Launchpad with Dave Kluge, you got the Mailbag Show, you've got the DFS Power Grid. You've got so many great opportunities to watch some awesome content and help you win your league. Okay. If you have any questions about the waiver wire this week, drop your waiver wire questions in the comments below, and I will do my very best to get back to each and every one of you personally. Let's get back to the show. All right, another name of a wide receiver that we've been talking about for a couple weeks now, and it's Treylon Burks. So much hype and excitement leading up into the season for Treylon as a rookie. Right now, he's only rostered in 51% of Yahoo leagues, only 37% of ESPN leagues. And you start to wonder, like, what's happening that a lot of these players aren't getting picked up? Are these kind of just like leagues that have gone dead? What's going on? But Treylon Burks, he played 67% of the snaps last week. He's second in routes run on the team, and he led the team in targets despite being second on the team in routes. So, oh yeah, by the way, he scored a touchdown. Not a receiving touchdown, or not a touchdown where he was supposed to score, but he recovered a fumble at Derrick Henry. It got punched out, man, like at the 2-yard line, and Treylon just happened to be there, so it counts technically. But I think there's a lot of excitement with Treylon, and I think that the excitement is warranted, but I do caution some fantasy managers a little bit here, Vig. Tennessee's going to go up against Philly next week, and the Eagles have been quite good against wide receivers. They're 7th against wide receivers, and but then they get a good matchup against Jacksonville. So I think that is it going to be something where Treylon becomes pretty matchup dependent?
I think so. And, we're talking about wide receiver. These are wide receiver waiver wire targets. We're not saying they're all great targets or good targets, but these are people that come up, and these are the thoughts we have. So do I love him for next week? No, but we know he's got the upside, right? We know his style of play, these really deep balls, these like big crossing routes where he finds himself open in the middle of the field. We know the talent is there. This is another guy who could have incredibly high upside, but he could be an absolute dud week in and week out too. I think of him as a bit of a potential bench clogger when you talk about roster cloggers. But again, if things click, I think next week will give us a better indication of how he might do in week 14 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he could be an absolute monster.
All right, so another wide receiver here as we're going through the whole wide receiver list. Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup is a guy that I think that had he been healthy, I think that a lot of people would already have him on their roster. And I think so much of it was just him recovering from the ACL injury. And probably a lot of people took flyers on him early in the year and then just dropped him. And he's been out there on waivers for you. But Michael Gallup, Big, talk to me about Gallup.
He's available in over half of Yahoo and ESPN leagues, and I think that's for good reason. His name keeps coming up, but here are the positives. He is averaging over 6 targets a game for the last 4 games. His target share is getting up near 30%. It was 27.5, which is the highest since week 5. He was tied for 5th overall this week in air yards with 135. And that's a good thing, folks. For Alfredo, you can talk about what air yards mean, because I know we love to talk about, like, explain what these terms are. But the only thing I would caution you with Michael Gallup is the next 2 games are going to be sort of tough games against the Colts and the Texans, both of who have been pretty good against opposing fantasy wide receivers and are in the top 4. But I don't know, man. This, all these numbers. Does this mean I should take Gallup? 27.5% target share, 5th in air yards, lots of targets per game. What am I doing, dude? What am I doing with Gallup?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, you talked about the air yards, right? And for those who aren't aware of what that means, that's simply the amount of yards that the ball travels when that player is being targeted. So it gives you a better idea of is this a deep ball type threat? Is this a player that has potential to basically break open a game, or are they getting some of those like really shallow targets? So essentially what you're seeing is that Michael Gallup is being used, but the question is he going to get the usage to the point where you're like, I need to start this guy every week, or can I trust him in a spot start? We don't know. We're kind of taking the risk on that and hoping that he becomes that. But even with, CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, Tony Pollard, I'm not going to say Zeke because he's not really catching all that much, but Michael Gallup, he could very well get lost in the fray. Like this is another guy who's very 50-50 on this. I don't feel super strongly about him. And I actually think that after having such a good game on a big national stage on Thanksgiving in front of so many people right now, he could actually be a really good sell candidate right before your trade deadline. There's some leagues that have not had their trade deadline yet. And listen, Odell Beckham might be joining the Dallas Cowboys. And this is a name that keeps getting floated around all season. And he has been listed with the Cowboys quite a bit. And right now that's the team that's the odds on favorite to get him. So I think that something like that, a signing of OBJ, only hurts Michael Gallup. So if you do have that opportunity, to maybe sell him and package him for something and go get one of those starters that but you'll be able to get you into the playoffs. They don't have a bye week coming up. That could be really helpful for you. All right, let's get to our final wide receiver name here. And Vig, I wanted you to talk about this player when we brought it up pre-show, because this is a Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver that I think has been criminally underrated throughout the season. I think he's been forgotten throughout the season. And he finally had the blow up game that we've been waiting for. It's Zay Jones, wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yay Jones, as I'm calling him, because anytime I think about him, I just want to say yay in my mind. Is outstanding. Shut up, first off. He's outstanding. He is the best Jones target on that squad right now. We got a lot of Jones on that squad. But all jokes aside, honestly, he has been great sort of all season. It just hasn't been with enough consistent volume. And I don't want to like immediately freak out and be like, oh my God, this is it. You got to go get him. He had a great game. 14 targets, 11 receptions, 145 yards. That 2-point conversion that if you watch a play, you know there was no other option. It was designed a Zay Jones play from the start. But the guy has consistently been a top 30 wide receiver in all major receiving metrics. You were talking about him being like, criminally underrated, but routes, targets, reception, the guy has been just absolutely incredible. Now let's think, what does that mean moving forward? The team is playing with confidence. Trevor Lawrence has been far better this year. He's only got like 6 interceptions compared to like 18 or something last year. And the next couple of games are against the Lions and the Titans, who are giving up third and second most points, respectively, to opposing fantasy wide receivers. And this just makes me really excited for what's to come. And again, he is available in 75% of Yahoo leagues and 69% of ESPN leagues. Go grab Zay Jones. Of all the people we've talked about, I feel like Zay Jones is one of the easiest recommendations for me to go and grab, because I think that the Jaguars are going to continue to find themselves in a position where they can get Zay Jones really, really involved. And he's just been fantastic this year.
And I got to say, I think we'd be remiss at this point not to discuss that Trevor Lawrence now becomes a really great add at the quarterback spot, considering that schedule going forward, considering how good he has looked over the past few weeks. And this last game was, man, that was a big coming out party for Trevor Lawrence. So this Jaguars team, they're getting hot at the right time, and it could work out really well for fantasy managers. All right, boys and girls, welcome to the Rehab Roundup. I got myself a big hat this time, Vig. I told you I was going to have a cowboy hat. It's Big Hat Week, and I'm here showing you mine.
I cannot take you seriously. First, I've been a strong opponent of this voice, and now you have a digital hat. Carry on. You
can't even take it off. Look at that. Exactly. I'm trying to do it. You can't
take it off.
You can't stop me and my big hat. Let's talk about the Rehab Roundup here, though. The first player we're going to take a look at, Christian McCaffrey.
All right. It looks like the guy's got a bit of a knee injury, a patellar tendonitis, or an inflammation of sort of the patella, your kneecap. Many folks have already said this. I don't have too much to say on top of this. It looks like it's sort of a load management issue. If you have Christian McCaffrey, outside of him being out for any given game, you pretty much are going to start him. Elijah Mitchell, sprained his MCL and is probably going to miss some time. So I would say, watch the injury report. If you got Christian McCaffrey, you're going to start him. It's pretty much a no-brainer. But be careful. I mean, we may have to play things by ear, seeing what the team does.
Next player we're going to talk about is another running back. This is from your Jaguars, Travis Etienne.
Yeah, honestly, Travis Etienne was cleared to come back in week 12. So we think he'll be good to go for week 13. He said he'd be back, but here's why we're a little concerned, was that it was the same midfoot where he had his season-ending Lisfranc injury. So I think the Jaguars are going to be a little ginger about what they do here. They came back without him and won a good game. They found ways to use, Michael Hasty of all people. So I would be a little careful. See what happens moving forward. But Travis Etienne, by all accounts, looks like he's going to be back and give you what he's been giving you all season, which has been a pretty decent RB3-ish value.
All right, wait, really quick. I got some big hat energy right now, so I got to ask, Vig, should we be worried at all about JaMychal Hasty, Darrell Henderson, those guys taking work from Travis Etienne going forward?
I mean, in theory, yeah, but Hasty has just been a scary person to watch. Every time he got the ball, like against the Raiders, he fumbles it on a play. Like I like to think that the team is maybe getting some confidence back in Hasty, but they don't. So I'm not very worried about Hasty. And Henderson wasn't even like ready to play, it sounds like. So I don't know that they take up too much away from Travis Etienne. Of course, you know, it all depends on what the team does, but Etienne's role and what he can do, he is still the lead back there. He is still the guy on receiving downs, even more than JaMychal Hasty. So if Etienne's healthy, maybe they take away a little bit, but I don't expect them to take away too much. Think about what Travis Etienne was doing with J-Rob anyway, right? Henderson is basically what they're trying to do is make him J-Rob's role.
Yeah, I think that what you're going to see is that, you know, Darrell Henderson is supposed to have that running down role and Hasty takes that receiving role, but those are more so insurance policies for Travis Etienne, not to take away from him. So as long as Etienne is healthy, he should be good to go. All right, I'm back into character, got my big hat, and we're talking about Michael Carter, running back for the New York Jets.
Yeah, he sprained his ankle. It's not the dreaded high ankle sprain. It's a bit of a low ankle sprain, which is not that serious an issue. May miss a week or two at absolute most, but you know, he's day to day right now. So watch injury reports, be careful, you know, see what they say. But if you have Michael Carter, don't do any panic things. Just see what happens.
Next player is Darnell Mooney, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, this is really unfortunate. But the latest news sounds like his ankle injury, which was initially listed as like a high ankle sprain, sounds like a pretty severe ankle injury. Head coach out there said that it sounds like he's going to have season-ending surgery. That's sort of what the news is out there at the moment. So probably someone that you'll be putting on your IR or dumping entirely at this point, which is really unfortunate for a running back we all really like. But I have not a lot of hope for Darnell Mooney coming back and doing anything significant this year.
It seems like we've lost another wide receiver, and it's Allen Robinson of the Rams.
Yeah, not that Allen Robinson was anyone you were starting anyway. There was a lot of hope for him this year after these 2 bad years back to back. We thought he'd be great, but you know, honestly, he's done for the season. Looks like he's getting foot surgery. In theory, he'll be fine for 2023. I'm not even sure what that means anymore. Like, do I have any confidence in Allen Robinson's abilities to be like a reasonable fantasy football player? I honestly don't know. So I'm not very excited about it either way, but poor guy, obviously you got to feel for a player who's just really trying to make a comeback and looks like he's out for the season.
All right. Well, while we're here, are there any Rams wide receivers? Because I debated even having us talk about Van Jefferson this week, but it's just, I don't think there's a Rams wide receiver that it really matters like that they should be rostered. Vic, is there anyone, Van Jefferson, Ben Skoranek, Tutu Atwell, like any of these guys get you excited for fantasy, especially with Bryce Perkins being the one throwing them the ball?
No, right? And so that's the thing. So when we talk about wide receivers, it's going to be all about volume and like the percentage of time they're on the field, their target share, and like none of these guys give me any level of excitement. I would rather watch you in this confounded hat with your stupid rehab roundup voice than roster one of the Rams wide receivers.
All right, we told you to stick around to the end because we are talking about some of these deep league waiver wire ads that can help you get into the playoffs and hopefully even win your fantasy league. And here's a guy that I think has a really big, just kind of pendulum of outcomes, and it's Ty Davis-Price. I mean, how can you not like a player named Tyrion? He's only owned in 1%, rostered in 1% of Yahoo and ESPN leagues. And this is all based on the injuries to Elijah Mitchell, because we don't know what's going to happen there. It looks like it's a re-injury of the same knee, that same MCL that he was having problems with. And then Christian McCaffrey having what could be seen as a load management issue now going forward with this patella injury. So you might see a lot of people talking about Jordan Mason or going after Jordan Mason in your league. But remember, last time when both of these guys were active, it was TDP, Ty Davis-Price, who is out touching Jordan Mason 14-0. Mason is kept on the active roster because he's a special teamer. But Tyrion Davis-Price is the guy that, should there be any issue with Elijah Mitchell, Christian McCaffrey, he could potentially become the lead back in this very, very dangerous offense. He's a deep dart throw. If you're desperate at running back, but man, I think that's a pretty savvy move to make and just add him at the bottom of your bench.
This next guy doesn't even feel like that deep a dart throw. I know you went real deep to start, but he's still available in so many leagues, and it's Foster Moreau. He's available in 39%, or he's only rostered in 39%, so available in 61% of Yahoo leagues, 65% of ESPN leagues, for a position that's historically tough to get good consistency. But this guy has been the tight end 7 over the last 3 weeks, and he has played 100% of the snaps in the last 2 weeks. And ever since week 7, he's been at least 96% of snaps. So all of these numbers to say he is on the field all the time. And that means he is always a potential target for any of these passing throws from Derek Carr. And coming up, they have pretty decent matchups against the Chargers, Patriots, and the Steelers. So tight end is tough. We've been besieged with tight end injuries, right? A lot of big time tight ends are out for the season or not going to be playing for a while or on the IR. And the fact that Foster Moreau is still so widely available tells me that either A, you're not in any tight end trouble, or B, you have no idea what you're doing, because I don't have him in one of my leagues and I should pick him up and I have no idea what I'm doing, clearly. But also, we haven't talked about this strategy too much. Just a real quick question for you. We talked about it like way earlier, like not on this show, but what if my guy I'm playing against this week, what if he or she needs a tight end? Do you ever pick up a player to block them from picking up that guy who's up next? Because that's what I did this morning for Foster Moreau. I picked him up because I got someone who desperately needs a tight end.
Oh, 100%. Especially as you get later into the year here. I love doing that, especially if you have the roster space, right? Like, that you have a pretty deep bench, you have players you can get rid of, you know who your starters are, and you're competing for whether it's seeding or a bye week or whatever it is listen, especially redraft leagues, you can stack up defenses, you could go stack up quarterbacks, tight ends, all those premium positions where there's not a lot of those players, there's a finite amount of them. Yeah, go ahead and stack them up and look ahead to your opponents that are coming up in week 13, week 14. Find out who they have on buys, because there are going to be bye weeks for the next 2 weeks. Find out who they have and see if you can go ahead and maybe get one step ahead of them, man. Play chess, not checkers. All right, the next player we're going to be talking about here is Skyy Moore, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he is rostered in just 10% of Yahoo leagues and just 17% of ESPN leagues. And I think he's been a guy that was talked a lot more about in the dynasty circles, right? Because it's very exciting that you got a rookie wide receiver finally going to the Kansas City Chiefs. And a lot of that has changed, right? Juju has kind of shown up. Juju Smith-Schuster has shown up as kind of the wide receiver 1 for that team. They signed Marcus Valdes-Scantling. They traded for Kadarius Toney. And really, the only times we've been seeing Skyy Moore is when he was just muffing punts and he couldn't ever grab the ball out of the air. But now he's actually getting onto the field. He's becoming a part of the offense because of all these injuries to Mecole Hardman and Kadarius Toney and Juju Smith-Schuster. And he's had 10 receptions on 12 targets over the last 2 games. So he's getting you 5 receptions a game. And he's getting really worked into that Mecole Hardman, Kadarius Toney role as the yards after catch guy. And that's what he was so good at in college. If I remember correctly, he broke the most tackles amongst all wide receivers in college. And I believe he also led the nation in yards after catch. So this is a guy that this lends perfectly to his skill set. This past week, he played 48% of the snaps, 40% target per route run rate, which is excellent. I remember people were just taking their pants off when Treylon Burks was at 32%. So 40% for Skyy Moore is just absolutely fantastic. It is worth noting that this past week, Juju Smith-Schuster only played 38% of the snaps. He played the exact same amount the week before. So there's a little bit of a transition going on here with the Kansas City Chiefs offense. So it could lean in more towards Skyy Moore's direction, and he could see a lot more targets. But that's why this is one of those deep waiver wire ads, because it could just all go right back to where it was before. That's going to be something to monitor here with Skyy Moore.
Zonovan Bam Knight. You thought you had a deep dart throw. How deep is this? He is rostered in 0% of ESPN leagues and 1% of Yahoo leagues. And his name is Bam.
I feel like you just really, really wanted to say Zonovan.
I did want to say Zonovan.
You said it almost like he was a superhero. Zonovan like Bam Knight.
But, let's think about this for a second. We're talking about deeper waiver wire ads that may actually have some relevance for you, right? The big news was James Robinson, right, a few weeks ago, joining the Jet squad there, but he was a healthy scratch, a healthy inactive in week 12. Like, the guy's like currently in, I don't know, some sort of running back purgatory, but it appears to be demoted to like the 3rd, 4th really running back behind Carter, Knight, and Ty Johnson. And Bam played 18 of 22 snaps after Carter left the game. We talked about, we got to monitor Carter's injury and what's going on with that. But if he misses time, Bam, primarily becoming this early down and goal line guy, actually gets this role where he might be able to get you some points. We also know he's going to have some of the volume with getting twice as many snaps as Ty Johnson. So this is someone who's rostered like practically nowhere and may actually have a decent role in the Jets offense going forward. So certainly a deep dart throw, but maybe not the deepest.
Yeah, I don't know. Like this is a player who he was undrafted, and I didn't love him or hate him. Coming out of college, he was just kind of there. I thought he was a pretty good runner, but he wasn't one of those guys that I fell in love with. But he could be thrust into a really good opportunity here, where the Jets have the second easiest remaining strength of schedule for running backs. So whether it's Michael Carter or Zonovan Bam Knight, or Ty Johnson, or heck, even James Robinson gets thrown back into the mix, there could be a running back that comes out of this group that gives you fantasy value here and in the most pivotal and important part of your season. So yeah, I'm willing to take the flyer on Zonovan Knight. All right, the last player we're going to talk about here is Kyren Williams, running back for the Los Angeles Rams. And some of you were saying, like, this should have been the first guy you talked about when you're talking about these deep waiver, because like this is probably the name that more people know because of the team that he's on. But you also have to consider the surroundings there. Okay, we just talked about
what surroundings
exactly. Like we just talked about not really wanting to grab any of the wide receivers on this team. The running backs haven't been great. Okay, they cut Darrell Henderson, who was for all intents and purposes their best running back, and he wasn't very good throughout the year. Cam Akers has not been very good. Kyren Williams has not run the ball very well. This was something I was not a fan of his coming out of college. The athleticism didn't show, and I really didn't like him as a runner, but he always possessed these skills as a receiver and as a good pass blocker. And that's where he's getting into the game. Okay. He participated in 70% of the team's snaps last week. He led the running backs in targets, receptions, and carries. So this pendulum, as I've mentioned before, sort of swinging towards Kyren Williams, and he got all the passing down work and surprisingly all the short yardage work. He is not a big guy, and for some reason, he is taking short yardage work from Cam Akers. So it's an interesting point where the Rams are getting to here, because they're not really contending for anything. And I think that we could end up seeing a lot more Kyren Williams, because they really want to determine where their backfield is going to be next year, especially with the release of Darrell Henderson. So Vig, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot more Kyren Williams here, considering that the Rams also have the easiest strength of schedule remaining for a fantasy running back.
Yeah, and I like how you phrase this. It's almost like the Rams are in an extended preseason. They got really nothing to play for, right? It's not like they literally, they mortgaged their entire future. It's not like they have draft picks or something, right? So it looks like they're just trying things out and they're trying to see what happens. Like Akers has improved his efficiency a bit over the last couple of weeks, right? He, is okay, 4.4, 4.5 yards per carry. So I don't know how pretty this whole like Rams backfield situation is going to be, but maybe Kyren gives you sort of a desperation running back in a pinch. And you never know what happens with injuries. So it's maybe a good idea to just, if you have a deep bench, Kyren Williams sounds like someone that's a relatively, not going to hurt, might not help, but certainly won't hurt sort of ad.
All right, that's it for us. We gave you all of our week 13 waiver wire ads, from, well, the guys that are probably already rostered to the guys that are definitely not rostered anywhere. Vig gave us the breakdown of the rehab roundup, and we got to just hear all the outcomes here for the injuries and how you should pivot, what you should be looking for. We will see you guys later on in the week, as I'll be back with Dave Kluge, and I will be back with Dr. Vig next week. Adios.
Adios.